Well, hello, my name's Louise Savage. An extremely warm welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you are a returning viewer, and an equally warm welcome if you are joining me for the first time with my musings, witterings, mutterings. I don't know what we call them. Anyway, I've had the most amazing months reading. I can't quite believe how much I've got through in that time. I think it's partly because it's my birthday month, and I've been treated to lots of lovely experiences, but also had quite a bit of time to laze around and read. But also because the nights are drawing in, and therefore I'm not out in the garden till goodness knows when. And so, yeah, I tend to read at a more rapid rate at this time of year. Well, I don't think I read more quickly. That wasn't very well expressed, was it? I think I spend more time reading is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, was non-fiction November, and so I did read 3 works of non-fiction, which is unusual for me. I might manage one maybe in a month, maybe none at all. And I really enjoyed all of them. So I'll start with those. The very first one I read was Richard E. Grant's Pocketful of Happiness. Also went to see him in a fabulous thriller. Oh my goodness, what's it called? The name's gone out of my head, but it was great. He played an author, and yeah, it was just a really complex story about his son and his son's death and what the causes of that might have been. And the setting was brilliant, and yeah, really loved it. Anyway, can't remember the name, which is rubbish. So this in this book, Richard E. Grant, who is a lifelong diarist, so you know, it's a memoir / diary, and it's a format that he's been honing, perhaps without realizing it, for many years since he was a child. And my interest was piqued in this book because I went to see him interviewed when Simon Savage interviewed him at the Hay Festival, and I found his attitude towards his relationship with his wife and the way he talked about his experience of her illness. She died of cancer, sadly. I want to say 2 years ago now. And basically in this memoir, he charts the progress of the last few months of her life, and he seems to do it in an incredibly honest way. It's not sugar-coated at all. He's quite a sentimental man, but it's not a sentimental piece of writing, which I think is really interesting. He absolutely loved his wife, and they had a really very strong marriage. Also, his daughter figures a lot in the book as well. And I just love the rawness of it. I love the honesty of it. I think, again, it's a very good, an excellent book about grief and the impact of grief. It's a fantastic book in terms of trying to understand the process of being with someone you love when they are in the last stages of a dreadful disease. I sort of almost wish I'd been able to read something like this before I'd had to face those kind of situations myself in my own personal life. The other thing I found really interesting about it actually was the Hollywood side of it, because I don't tend to read about that world at all. It's not something that particularly interests me. Maybe it should, although I'd loved reading Swan Song years ago, which was about 7 Hollywood stars and their relationship with Truman Capote. But anyway, yeah, so I did find all of that quite interesting, although probably personally I could have done with a little bit less of it. But no, I did find that, you know, and his obsession with Barbra Streisand, you know, he's got a really good sense of humour. He pokes fun at himself. He's quirky. He's interesting. It's a really entertaining read, and I highly recommend it. And then you will know, if you've watched my channel for a while, that Simon and I I'd managed to persuade him to recommend me some reads for Non-Fiction November, and this was one of his recommendations. So this is Citizen by Claudia Rankin, who is a poet and author and essayist and very talented woman. And this is such a hard-hitting, very, very clever, very thoughtful. Don't even know how to describe it. Obviously, it's a book, but it's almost like prose reflections. Again, it's written. A lot of it is written in sort of quite fragmentary prose, and it starts off with sort of snapshots almost of the casual racism that she experiences in her day-to-day life, and also as an academic, and reading how, you know, one academic might casually say something that's so, when you actually stand back and think about it, is absolutely appalling and unconscionable. And yet this is coming from someone who is of equal status professionally. It's really shocking, and it's a series of meditations on the impact of being Black in America. She looks at the Serena Williams story, which, you know, in a way that really brought it to my attention, and I felt really ignorant. That I mean, I haven't followed tennis for years, to be fair, but nevertheless, I felt really ignorant that I wasn't aware of the experiences that she's had to go through as a professional sports person. It looks at football, it looks at races in football, it looks at, towards the end of the book, there are reflections on the cases of some of the high profile murders of young Black men in America as well, particularly by the police. And I just found the whole thing was like a really sort of painful jolt. It was like sort of constantly having electric shock treatment and just thinking, oh my God, you know, and in some cases it was things I knew about, in other cases it wasn't. And the whole thing is interspersed with extraordinary, sometimes photographs. I mean, here we've got, you know, somebody mimicking Serena. I mean, that's horrendous, another tennis star. And then, you know, there's all sorts of wonderful works of art and so on. The pictures are so carefully chosen to kind of blend in with the tone of the moment that you're reading about in the book. So I think this serves as a real reminder of the fact that we still have such a long way to go. And although it's written specifically about America, although it isn't, because there's a European football incident in it, I think this could equally be Britain. You know, I don't really see much difference at all in terms of the way that we still treat people of other races. So yeah, I really again recommend this. It's hard hitting and it's tough, but I think it's a really important book. And then this book, which I've had on my shelves for a really long time, and I don't know why I haven't read it yet. So it's Margaret Atwood's The Tent. And again, it's like a cornucopia of different essays, reflections, almost stories, some poems, and all of them written with her trademark sort of wry, wicked, clever, funny reflections on you name it. I mean, there is just all sorts in here. I don't know, things like, you know, there are certain essays that really, really make you think. There are reflections on orphans. There's quite a lot in here about the afterlife, you know, potentially what that might be like, or how, you know, how it might be perceived. There's a lovely poem about animals what would happen if animals rejected their names, and it appears to be about the imposition of the way that humans impose their power and attitude on animals, but actually it's got more of a twist to it. My absolute favourite moment, if I can find it, is, oh no, not that one. I put some little tabs in as I was reading it. Yeah, Our Cat Enters Heaven. And it's just, I mean, I found it hilarious and also shocking in equal measure. It's only short, look, it's only a couple of pages. But by the end of it, it packs such a punch in the final sentence. And it's about a cat arriving in heaven, you know, and the things that it's allowed to do. And the perception of God. And it's just, I just thought it was just super. So I found this thoroughly entertaining, and usually with this sort of book I dip into it every now and then over the period of maybe about 5 or 6 months and spin it out, but I actually sat down and read this almost in one go. It was like, oh, I want a bit more, I want a bit more, I want a bit more. I found it really addictive. So yeah, absolutely lovely. And the illustrations are Margaret Atwood's own as well, so you've got her sort of cheeky images as well inside. So I think, yeah, I thought that was wonderful. And then in terms of the first book I actually read this month was fiction, and it was this one, Minor Detail, by Adania Shibli. Now, this is the story of a young Bedouin girl being captured by Israeli soldiers in 1949 in the Negev desert. And it's just after that sort of, it's just after there's been really serious conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and the book is written by a Palestinian woman, and it looks at the brutality of the way this woman is treated. She's raped by the Israeli soldiers, but it's told from the perspective of an Israeli soldier who keeps himself very much isolated from his men. He's in charge of them, but he kind of isolates himself. He's bitten by a spider, and it kind of seems to be really affecting his behaviour. His, you know, his he sort of withdraws into himself, and it's called Minor Detail, and it's written in such intense detail. It reminds me of the sort of sparseness of somebody like Hemingway. You know, every action that the soldier goes through, including things like his hygiene routines and so on, his journeys into the desert, are meticulously detailed. And I thought that was brilliant, because you really, it builds suspense, it builds tension, but you really are sort of starting to see inside the mind of the character. And then halfway through, it switches to the narrative of a Palestinian woman who was born 25 years after this rape happened in the desert. And she, it's kind of almost been erased from history, but she finds out about it and she gets obsessed with it and pursues it, and therefore makes quite a dangerous journey back to the Negev desert, crossing through various checkpoints in order to get there, and compromises herself. Now, I thought this book was absolutely superb. I thought it was incredibly powerful in terms of portraying the way that occupation, the way that conflict can influence the behaviour and the attitudes of the people who are involved in it, and how dehumanising it is. I want to make it absolutely clear at this point, because I had a bit of a critical communication a few months ago, and I completely understand why. I think it's really difficult at the moment to talk about this conflict without appearing to be prejudiced in one way or the other. And I want to make it very clear that I have so much sympathy for every side involved in this situation. The people of Gaza, the people of Palestine, but equally the people of Israel, because there is absolutely no way that anyone can condone what happened to them when Hamas attacked them 52 days ago, I think it is, something like that, maybe a little bit longer. It was inhumane. It was absolutely appalling. And I think that, you know, I've got compassion for people on both sides of this problem. The history of this situation is so complicated. I actually think there are very few people in the world who properly understand it. You know, I think there are huge grievances on both sides. I think we have massive problems with the fact that a lot of people confuse Hamas with Palestinians. They are two different things. I know they're enmeshed, but they are different. You know, I really, the whole situation is thoroughly concerning. And I think, you know, call me naive if you want to, but the only way out of this solution is discussion and diplomacy. And I know that's failed over and over again. But there is so much entrenched grievance, as I say, on both sides of this situation, that no amount of military intervention is going to result, I don't think personally, in a solution. And I think, you know, the scenes that are playing out at the moment, you know, we had that appalling incident in Israel, but now we also have appalling incident playing out in Gaza itself. And I think, as I say, I think we have to be very careful how we talk about it. I think we have to be very careful what we say on social media. But I just want to make it clear that my personal perspective is that nobody wins here. Nobody is winning. Everybody who's involved in this is losing out. And I you know, I really just, you know, wish that we could put everybody around a table and talk it through until there was some sort of solution. Goodness knows how that could happen. I know it's almost impossible. Now, going back to literature, I think this kind of writing is so important for trying to, it's massively important that these voices are heard and that we try and understand it from different perspectives. And, you know, if anyone knows of I've read, I'm trying to think what I have read now. I have read a few novels set in Israel from the Israeli perspective, but it will have been a while ago. And if anyone knows of anything that I could read as a counterbalance to this, as it were, I'd be really grateful to know what those novels are. So yeah, that's all I really want to say. I know I've said quite a lot, but that's all I want to say on this awful political situation. Yeah. And then I moved on to something very, very different. You know, I think maybe some of my attitude towards war is shaped by the fact that I've read so much historical fiction and also obviously studied things like the Iliad, you know, since I was quite young. And I mean, this novel is not about war, it's about the past. So this is Kate Mosse's Ghost Ship, which I was really looking forward to reading and absolutely enjoyed it it's a fantastic historical romp. But I love the way that she's putting women into history and giving them certain amount of power at times and giving them, you know, adventure. So this picks up with Louise, namesake, obviously, Raydon Joubert. It's the 1600s. She is based in La Rochelle, and she is desperate to have her own boat. You know, it offers her independence. She enjoys travelling by sea, and that does come to pass. And as a result, she and her friend Gilles, who has a really sort of quite a very dark secret and an absolutely hideous relationship with his mother, they end up on this ship and begin to strike terror on the high seas. But the terror that they're striking is against the slave ships that are roaming the Mediterranean, transporting slaves. And I just really enjoyed the sort of, it was a real page turner, lots of nice plot twists, lots of references to earlier characters that you come familiar with in the previous 2 novels in this saga. I think there's a 4th one on its way. It was just pure joy to read it. And what I love about Kate Mosse's writing is the way that she really does help you to walk those streets or to stride that boat. You know, I do feel I've been at sea with these characters in the 1600s. I do feel I understand what it's like to you know, course through those oceans. There wasn't so much interplay to do with religion in this novel as perhaps the earlier ones. And I just wanted them to get on that boat quicker. You know, I've been promised lesbian pirates and I wanted them sooner. But I did absolutely thoroughly enjoy it. What a wonderful romp. Then I went back to my bookshelves to look for something that had been on my bookshelves for ever and a day, which was the November book prompt for the Savage Prompts 2023. And I picked up The Kraken Wakes by John Wyndham, which has been on my shelf forever. And I am a real fan of John Wyndham's writing. I don't know whether you've heard of The Day of the Triffids, or what else is there, The Midwich Cuckoos, or I can't think, Seeds of something or other, or The Chrysalids. But I love the way that he makes the implausible seem really plausible. And I thoroughly enjoyed this as well. It's science fiction, which is not really a genre that I go to very often, and yet when I do, I usually really enjoy it. And it's written, I think, in the 50s, I'm guessing. Might be further back than that. Yeah, it was published in 53. And it starts with him reflecting on his honeymoon with his wife, the main character, whose name I've forgotten. Honestly, my memory, it's shocking, really. I only read it a few weeks ago. Can't remember his name, but anyway. So this married couple, they're on their honeymoon and they're on a cruise liner, and they see this strange sort of thing happen in the sky, and something appears to descend into the ocean, and then they kind of forget about it until later. And it transpires that something has landed in the ocean. Something is living down there. And all these coastal communities start to be invaded by these sort of almost metallic tank-like discs that come out of the water and then sort of cover everything in this kind of sludgy, slimy, yucky stuff. And they send out suckers and they grab people, and they all sort of, you know, they get grabbed off the beach and swept out to sea or underneath the sea. And as the novel progresses, things gradually get worse and worse and worse. But the pace of it is beautifully slow. And when I say beautifully slow, it's because that's why it becomes so plausible, because you get, you know, real detail about the changing attitudes towards what's happening. I love the way Wyndham is so snarky about the government. And, you know, having lived through the COVID crisis, I think he's kind of right in the way that he portrays government's attitude towards these things. They're not necessarily looking for a solution or taking things as seriously as they should, as soon as they should. The other thing I loved about it was the relationship with his wife. Both he and his wife work for an organisation which is very similar to the BBC, and they're reporters. But she is a really strong character and quite often works things out way before he does. And that sort of surprised me for a novel that was written in the early 50s. I really liked the fact that he gave her this kind of very powerful, very she's a real force to be reckoned with, his wife. And I loved that, because I think we sort of tend to think of you know, and up until the 60s maybe, that you didn't have marriages of equals, or not quite equals, but clearly you do. So yeah, I loved this. And I do commend John Wyndham to you if you've not read him before, because as I say, it's just the way he makes these really, you know, The Day of the Triffids is about plants that take over London. I mean, you know, but it's real when you read it, when the way he writes it. And then I read Ada's Realm by Sharon, Dodua, Otoo. This is translated from German. I found this novel extraordinary. I didn't find it easy to read at all. It starts with a baby being born and dying in what will become Ghana in the, I want to say, the 1600s, and the Portuguese arrive as well to sort of colonize, and then you sort of get this succession of Adas who are born in later periods of history, one of whom is Ada Lovelace, the mathematician, who interestingly appeared in Emily Smith's Threads, which I read earlier this year and really enjoyed. So Ada Lovelace seems to be popping up and haunting me. And it looks at, so there's an Ada who's living in a concentration camp, there's and being sexually exploited. There's an Ada who is Ada Lovelace. Who's the other Ada? See, I've forgotten. And you kind of move from each of these Ada characters and look at the impact of colonialism and being a black woman has on their history. There's also this really intriguing bracelet that sort of appears in each of their personal stories, which I really liked. For me, this was, I think it's really clever, but almost too clever. So as you can see, I'm struggling to, there's not really much plot to it. It's reflection. And I'm really glad I read it, but I wouldn't necessarily rush out and say, pick up a copy, you must read it. It's much more sort of almost philosophical, psychological writing, I would say, than conventional fiction. And maybe, sometimes reading this kind of thing when I'm not hyper alert or I'm quite tired, maybe I didn't read it at the right time. So I did find it, I had to sort of push myself to keep going, but I did want to finish it. I didn't want to DNF it. So there is real merit in this book. I wonder how I'll feel about it in a month or two's time. It might be the sort of book that really settles and grows on me. I don't know. And then from that, I went to Helen Dunmore's Burning Bright, which I think is probably her second novel. She wrote this before The Spell of Winter, which won the inaugural Women's Prize Award nearly 30 years ago. I absolutely devoured this. I think it's a really clever exploration of the trafficking of young women. It's a young girl, she's only 16, called Nadine, and she is sexually exploited by a much, much older man who happens to be Finnish. He's called Kai. And he takes her from her home in Bristol, they go to Bristol. He takes her from her home in the north and they go to Bristol, and he sets her up in this crumbling old house which he and a friend of his have bought together. And in this crumbling old house, it's been occupied by squatters. They turfed the squatters out, but in this crumbling old house is living this really eccentric old lady called Enid. And is it Enid or Edith? You see, my name's Enid. It was Enid. My first instinct was right. And I just loved the character of Enid. She's living on right at the top of the house. She's got a real history of her own. So you follow Nadine's story, but you also follow Enid's story as well in the past when she was a young woman. And Nadine and Enid, because of their circumstances, they become quite codependent and they develop this sort of friendship, which is great because it spans all those generations, and you don't see that often enough in a novel, I can tell you. And yet friendships like that do exist. And it's quite, there's a lot of plot. She's being groomed so that they can exploit her and use her to fulfill the needs of a very, very famous politician within the world of the novel. And I just found it yeah, really, really fascinating. Very, very well written, of course, but really, really page turnery, and also thinking about, you know, why exploitation happens. Looking at, you know, the portraits of the men involved are really well executed, so you get a real sense of kind of what's motivating them and all the dark dealings that they're involved in. So it's really murky, grimy world. But yeah, I could not put it down. Not for the faint-hearted. And then I read New Boy by Tracy Chevalier, which was written for young adult readers, I'm guessing. But I love these kind of books. So basically, she's taken the story of Othello and she has placed it in a playground of sort of 10-11-year-olds. Which sounds implausible, but actually it works brilliantly. And I thought she wrote so well about what it's like to be that kind of age. You know, you're becoming really curious about the adult world. You're becoming curious about your own body. There's lots of, you know, peer pressure is phenomenal. Your teachers might seem so alien in some respects, but equally there are some who are not. And so this new boy, arrives at the school, and he's the only black boy who's ever been to the school, and he befriends Dee. So you can see the Othello and Desdemona thing going on there. And there is also a boy called Ian, who is the Argo character, etc., etc., etc. Some of these retellings can go really well. Sometimes they don't work, but I thought this was fab, because it kind of gave a really fresh angle on the whole story. Yes, there's jealousy in there. Yes, there are really strong emotions. Yes, it's tragic, but it's also saying something about the world of young children, which of course the original play doesn't touch. And I thought it was a real masterpiece, actually. And again, I sat down and read it all pretty much in one go. And finally, I read Lucy Gayheart by Willa Cather, which I referenced last week in my wintry video. This was written in the 1930s, but it's set slightly earlier, a few decades earlier. And Lucy Gayheart is a young, very talented pianist growing up in America. And she has this young man who's very interested in her. He's a banker. He would make a very safe bet for marriage. But she's already gone off and started to study music in a different city. Honestly, my brain... Chicago, of course it's Chicago. She goes off to study music in Chicago, and she meets a very, very talented male singer, and he's much, much older than her. And she develops, he asks her to be his accompanist, and it's about the relationship that develops between them. There's tragedy involved, but I thought the relationships in this book were so well drawn. And of course it's very much, you know, the appeal of the singer is to do with the fact that he gets art, that he's an artistic person, and she hasn't really met anyone who kind of taps into her artistic soul in the way that he does. And I kind of get that. Whereas, you know, back at home, she's got this very sort of solid, rigid, much more rigid banker who's interested in her, and doesn't, you know, music doesn't mean the same thing to him as it does to her. And that's really what the novel explores. I thought the structure of it was brilliant. I really loved the way it was structured, because you kind of almost begin and end in the same place, but things have changed so dramatically. And also the viewpoint changes right at the end. I have to be really careful what I say because I might give it away. I've never read anything by Willa Cather before, and I will certainly be picking up other books by her, because I just thought as I say, the relationships and the motifs. There's a whole thing, you know, there's a whole thing about feet in this story. So, you know, when the novel opens and Lucy's skating across that river, you're so aware of what her feet are doing and where they're taking her. And that sort of, there's feet, there are footprints set in concrete which come into play later in the novel. And of course it culminates with skating. I'm not giving anything away to say that. So I thought it was really deftly, finely structured, and a thoroughly enjoyable sort of psychological exploration, really, of this young girl, and you know, the impact of growing up in a relative backwater and then going to a big city and encountering new experiences. So yeah, what an amazing month of reading I have had. I've really loved it. I don't know what you've been reading. I'll be really interested to find out. And I've got a feeling, because I am, how far am I in? Got it somewhere. I'm reading my second AM Homes at the moment, and yeah, thoroughly enjoying that too. So yeah, well, the books are just the gift that keep on giving, aren't they? I can't believe how lucky I am to keep finding these wonderful worlds to dive into. Anyway, I'm going to go and do some more reading, so I will leave you, lovely lot, and hopefully speak to you all again very soon. Take care. Bye.